We have breaking news in Washington. White House staff and Speaker Boehner's staff are meeting to head off an unprecedented public conflict between the president and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It began today when the president surprised Republican Speaker John Boehner with this sentence in a letter hand-delivered to the Speaker. I respectfully request the opportunity to address a joint session of Congress on September 7th, 2011 at 8 p.m. The president's letter told Boehner, it is my intention to lay out a series of bipartisan proposals that the Congress can take immediately to continue to rebuild the American economy by strengthening small businesses, helping Americans get back to work, and putting more money in the paychecks of the middle class and working Americans while still reducing our deficit and getting our fiscal house in order. The president made his letter public before Boehner could even respond. Boehner's response came in a letter to the president hours later. I respectfully invite you to address a joint session of Congress on Thursday, September 8th, 2011, in the House chamber at a time that works best for your schedule. John Boehner doesn't mention it in his letter, but the real reason he doesn't want the president to speak next Wednesday at 8 p.m., as the president requested, is that a Republican presidential candidates debate is scheduled for exactly the same time. That debate, which will be sponsored by Politico and NBC News, will be the first to include the new Republican frontrunner, Texas Governor Rick Perry. Technically, the president cannot address a joint session of Congress whenever he feels like it. Joint sessions may not even meet unless both chambers agree to a concurrent resolution and invite the president to speak. Normally, a selection of the date and the time for a presidential address to a joint session is done privately, and it includes back and forth of this sort. Wednesday's good for us. What's good for you? Well, how about Thursday? Well, we can't do Thursday, and so on and so on. A historian for the House of Representatives tells NBC News that because these scheduling discussions are normally secret, a public rejection of a president's request for a joint session is essentially unprecedented. Speaker Boehner's spokesman, Brendan Buck, just released a statement reading, no one in the Speaker's office, not the Speaker, not any staff, signed off on the date the White House announced today. Unfortunately, we weren't even asked if that date worked for the House. Shortly before it arrived this morning, we were simply informed that a letter was coming. Earlier today, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said the president was not deliberately trying to overshadow the Republican candidates' debate.
It is coincidental. The president committed to speaking next week after the Labor Day holiday and immediately upon Congress's return. And there are a lot of factors that go into scheduling a speech before Congress, a joint session. Speech. And again, you can never find a perfect time.
The chairman of the Republican National Committee did not see it the same way. Reinhold Priebus, and yes, his real first name is Reinhold, tweeted, Barack Obama's request to give jobs speech the same night as GOP presidential debate is further proof this White House is all politics all the time. Speaker Boehner ultimately took the advice Rush Limbaugh gave him earlier today.
This is intended to disrupt the Republican debate. It's intended to make Obama look bigger than the Republicans, to look bigger than politics. And this is part of the presidential election campaign, and the House Republicans are going to have to realize they are part of it. Somebody in the intelligentsia, some people smarter than we are, somebody is going to write a piece or post a blog and say, Mr. Boehner, you are going to send the independents running right back to Obama if you don't grant him this speech. Because all the American people care about right now is jobs. They don't care about the Reagan Library. They don't care about the Republican presidential debate. All they care about is jobs. And if you tell the president that he can't come up on the date he wants, you're just going to send independents running back. That's what they're going to say to him. That's how they're going to try to intimidate Boehner. Boehner should say, Mr. President, I'm not going to assist you in your political games.
Joining me now, the co-author of Game Change, national affairs editor for New York Magazine, John Heilemann, also author of Revival, The Struggle for Survival Inside the Obama White House, MSNBC analyst Richard Wolff. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Richard, is this the night where I have to begin this program by saying Rush Limbaugh is right? The president was trying to upstage the Republican debate. Is there any real working theory to the contrary?
No, you don't have to say that Rush Limbaugh is right. This is obviously a campaign season, and the next day was a football game, and who really cares anyway? You can schedule both on the same day. It doesn't have to be the same time. What's curious about this is not just the back and the forth, because I think people who don't tune into politics and don't tune into this show are going to think they're all a bunch of squabbling school kids. The interesting question is, what is it about this president that has stripped away the veneer of respect that normally accompanies the office of the president? Why do Republicans think this president is unpresidential and shouldn't dare to request this kind of thing? It strikes me that it could be the economic times, it could be that he won so big in 2008, or it could be, let's face it, the color of his skin. This is an extraordinary reaction to a normal sequence of events when the economy's in trouble and we're entering a political season, and the reaction is out of all proportion.
John, how would Democrats react if we had a Republican incumbent president who had already announced his re-election campaign, and the campaign was well underway and being funded, as this one is, and he wanted to give a speech which could be easily seen as both a campaign speech and a governing speech, and wanted to do so at exactly the same time that the Democrats would have been meeting to have a presidential primary debate in which presumably those Democrats would be given a primetime opportunity to be criticizing that Republican president. How would Democrats have reacted if we just reversed this whole thing?
Well, I think Democrats, Lawrence, would probably have rolled over and granted the Republican president the night, but not out of respect for the office, but just because they don't play politics at the same with the same kind of relentless hardball attitude that a lot of the Republicans have played politics against President Obama so far in the first 2.5 years of his time in office. I think the one point where I'd take exception to what Richard said is that, the White House also deviated from the normal course of events here. As you know, and as you pointed out, Lawrence, normally the White House would have gone to Republicans quietly beforehand. Rush Limbaugh was right in one respect, at least. The White House clearly was playing politics here, clearly intended to upstage the Republican debate, thought that it was doing something smart and clever and tough politically, thought that Boehner would fold, and now is in the middle of this fight. The main point that I see here is that if this is the kind of fight that we're having, this kind of squabbling, childish pissing match that we're seeing already over just this speech, does anybody really think there's a chance that there's going to be any way for these two parties to come together and actually pass any legislation that will actually help the economy that will come out of this speech? I think not.
We'll be checking with MSNBC standards during the break to see whether we can call it that kind of match, but for the rest of the time we won't. Richard, this is I think I want to go to John's point about the White House's first move here, sending this letter up without a consultation, without the normal process.
Well, wait a second. As I understand it, that is in serious dispute here. These two accounts do not stack up. White House officials say there was actual notice paid. No matter what the Speaker's spokesman says, they were notified. Whether or not they raised objections to it privately before raising their objections to it publicly is also a matter of dispute. And again, to John's point, if they cannot agree on this, then they all look bad. This is small ball politics for both sides. But let's not pretend that there wasn't a back and forth, that this letter was sprung on these people. There is a dispute over what the reaction was when they were first informed. But the letter was not how this thing broke between these two parties. They should have made it clear beforehand. The fact that they cannot make it clear, it isn't just about Democrats playing more softball politics than Republicans. Democrats hated President Bush. They loathed everything he stood for, particularly in that second term, and yet they still respected the presidency when it came to these kind of ceremonial moments. This isn't happening with this president and with this Republican Party, and there is a basic question, why not?
John, I got to think that the White House saw it as a win either way. Either Boehner says yes, and we semi-humiliate him with the Rush Limbaugh crowd, and the president gets to completely upstage the Republican debate, or Boehner says no in what becomes this unprecedented public response to the president wanting to do a joint session address. And the White House wins again because now the unreasonable Republican once again looks like the unreasonable Republican.
Certainly it would be consistent with the White House's theory of the case that we've seen over the course of the past, really the whole Obama first term, but especially since the midterms, where the White House has sought to elevate President Obama, make him look like the reasonable, responsible adult in the room. They could portray Boehner's response as kind of petulant and childish, and certainly they will do that. There's no doubt that, as Richard is representing, he's representing a real feeling among a lot of people in the Democratic base that are very upset. And if you go on Twitter and if you listen to what people are saying right now, this notion that Obama has been dissed in some fundamental way is very much out there, and the White House will capitalize on that, this sense that that he is being disrespected in some unprecedented way. They gain politically from that, too, not just in the middle for those who want to see the president, who want to see politicians look like they're above this kind of petty squabbling, but also among people who are their loyalists, who believe the Republicans have no basic respect for the office as long as Barack Obama holds it.
Richard, NBC's Chuck Todd is reporting to us that the White House aides and Boehner aides are meeting right now as we speak, trying to come to an agreement on the time and the date. How will this turn out, and is there going to be a winner and a loser on the scheduling fight?
Well, I seriously doubt that the White House wanted to have a dispute about the date or put John Boehner on the spot. I'm sure they were quite happy to have the split screen and have the Republican presidential candidates have to respond in the moment to what he was trying to say or what he will be trying to say. So, the White House actually is not going to come out of this great because the president doesn't want to have this kind of dispute. They'll find some compromise on another day or at another time, and the left is going to say that the president caved again. So I don't think this is going to be a winner for him, just in terms of the scheduling dispute.
John Howman, is there a way for anybody to win this scheduling, a fight about scheduling a speech?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think that in a narrow sense, as I said a second ago, I think there are ways in which the White House will try to capitalize on it. But I actually do agree with Richard. I think that most Americans who don't watch cable television and don't read the political Twitter sphere, most Americans looking at this will once again look at this as a pox in both their houses. And will look at these people and say, I can't believe with 9.5% unemployment and 15% real unemployment, these people can't get it together enough to schedule a speech, that they can't agree on something that basic and that pedestrian.
Richard Wolff of MSNBC and John Holliman of New York Magazine, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, Lawrence.